Have you ever thought you had moved on from someone, only to have them walk right back into your life when you least expected it? Imagine this: you've built an empire. You wear suits worth more than some people's yearly salary. The world sees you as untouchable. And then, one ordinary afternoon, you step into a small, cozy restaurant, and your entire world stops. Because standing there, holding a tray with eyes you could never forget, is the woman you once promised forever to, the woman you abandoned, and she's pregnant. Welcome back to Dream Tales. If you're visiting for the first time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because here, every story reminds us of life's unexpected turns. And let me ask you a question. If the person you once loved and lost suddenly reappeared, carrying your child, would you beg for forgiveness, or walk away again? Today's story is about a man who had it all: money, power, respect. Or at least that's what the world believed. His name is Adrian Cole, a self-made millionaire who rose from nothing to sit among the elite. But behind the tailored suits and luxury cars was a man haunted by a choice he made years ago, a choice that cost him the love of his life: Naomi Bennett. Naomi wasn't just any woman. She was strong, graceful, and fearless, a black woman who carried herself like she was born to defy every limitation the world tried to place on her. She was the one who stood beside Adrian when he was just a struggling entrepreneur with a pocket full of dreams and nothing else. She believed in him before he believed in himself. But love alone wasn't enough to save them. When their relationship ended, Adrian told himself it was for the best. He buried the memories, focused on his career, and convinced himself that he had moved on. Years passed. His business empire grew. His name was in magazines, his bank accounts overflowed, and his calendar was filled with meetings in penthouses and dinners with people who wore smiles like masks. But what Adrian didn't know was that Naomi's story didn't end when she walked out of his life. She faced storms he couldn't imagine. And now, fate, or perhaps something greater, was about to bring their worlds crashing together in the most unexpected way. It happened on a day like any other. Adrian had a lunch meeting scheduled with a potential investor. The driver dropped him off in front of a modest, family-owned restaurant tucked away between two larger, flashier businesses. He stepped inside, adjusting his watch, already rehearsing the pitch he was about to deliver. And then he saw her. She was balancing a tray with one hand, her other hand instinctively resting against her round belly. Her uniform was plain, her hair tied back, but nothing could hide the glow of her beauty, or the shock in her eyes when they met his. The air seemed to thicken. The clinking of dishes, the chatter of customers, all of it faded. For a moment they just stared at each other, frozen in time. Adrian's breath caught in his throat. Questions collided in his mind, but one burned hotter than the rest. How did she end up here, and whose child is she carrying? He didn't know it yet, but the answers to those questions would shake the very foundation of his life. And as he took a hesitant step forward, one thing became painfully clear. He was not ready for what he was about to learn. To understand the weight of that moment in the restaurant, you need to know the man Adrian Cole had become. On paper, his life was the kind most people only dream about. At 36, Adrian was worth over $150 million. His mornings began in a penthouse overlooking the city skyline, where the glass walls caught the sunrise and poured golden light over Italian marble floors. He drove cars that turned heads, sleek machines worth more than some people's homes. His suits were tailored in Paris, his watches handcrafted in Switzerland, his shoes polished to perfection. But here's the thing about luxury: it can hide emptiness, but it can't fill it. Every morning, Adrian would step into his private elevator, ride down to the ground floor, and be greeted by employees who spoke to him with reverence. Yet, beneath the polite smiles, he could sense something hollow, an invisible wall between him and everyone else. Money had given him power, but it had also made him an island. He kept a schedule tighter than a bank vault. Back-to-back meetings, business lunches, networking events at rooftop bars. Deals were made over champagne and contracts signed on tables worth thousands. His phone never stopped buzzing, his inbox never emptied. But once the meetings ended, once the laughter faded, and once the city outside his window went dark, he was alone. Adrian didn't talk about Naomi. Not to his business partners. Not to the women he casually dated. It was easier to pretend she was just part of another life, one he had outgrown. He told himself it had ended because she couldn't understand his ambitions, because she didn't fit into the world he was building. But deep down, late at night, he knew that wasn't the truth. She had been the only person who saw him before the money. The only one who cared about his dreams, not his bank balance. Losing her had been his choice, and his biggest regret. The people in his circle didn't know that Adrian kept a small wooden box hidden in the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside were a few keepsakes, a ticket stub from their first movie date, a Polaroid of Naomi laughing under a summer sky, and a necklace she used to wear, a simple gold chain with a tiny heart pendant. He hadn't looked inside that box in months, but he never threw it away. That morning had been just like any other. A new investment opportunity had come his way, and he was meeting a prospective partner over lunch. The man had suggested a discreet, out-of-the-way restaurant instead of the usual high-end spots. Adrian didn't argue. He liked to keep things unpredictable sometimes. As the chauffeur pulled up, Adrian had glanced at the modest brick building sandwiched between a bakery and a bookstore. It wasn't the kind of place he usually visited, but it had a certain charm. Inside, the lighting was warm, the air filled with the smell of fresh bread and sizzling food. Adrian walked in, scanning the room, searching for his business contact. He didn't see him, because his attention was pulled in another direction entirely. A waitress in a simple navy blue uniform emerged from the kitchen, a tray balanced on one hand. Her steps were slow but steady, her other hand instinctively resting on her stomach. She turned her head, and for the first time in years, Adrian was staring into the eyes of Naomi Bennett. The man who had built an empire felt his chest tighten. His polished, controlled world began to crack, and he didn't even know yet that this meeting would change everything. Adrian's pulse quickened as if someone had pressed fast forward on his heartbeat. For a moment, he wondered if he was imagining her, if the years and the guilt had finally caught up to him, creating a ghost in broad daylight. But this wasn't a memory. This was Naomi, flesh and blood, standing just a few feet away. Her uniform was plain, a simple name tag pinned above her heart. But her eyes, those deep, steady eyes, were exactly as he remembered. They were sharper now, though. Older. Eyes that had seen too much. She froze when she saw him, her knuckles tightening around the tray. For a split second, the mask slipped. He caught a flicker of something raw, something painful. But then, just like that, it was gone, replaced with a professional composure that cut deeper than anger ever could. Table 3, the cook called from behind the counter. Naomi blinked, broke their gaze, and moved toward a corner booth as if nothing had happened. Adrian stood rooted to the floor. His investor still hadn't arrived, but suddenly the meeting didn't matter. His mind was a storm, memories crashing against questions. How long had it been? For years? 5. And now she was pregnant. The thought hit him like a punch. Is it mine? He slid into a booth, his eyes following her every move. She was slower now, careful with her steps. When she reached a nearby table, she bent slightly to set down plates, her free hand cradling her stomach like a shield. When she finally approached his table, the air between them thickened. She didn't greet him with warmth or bitterness, just a polite, detached tone as if he were any other customer. Good afternoon. What can I get for you? His mouth opened, but no words came. All the things he'd rehearsed in his head over the years, the apologies, the explanations, died in his throat. Naomi? His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't look up from her notepad. We have a lunch special today. Soup or salad to start. It was as if she'd built a wall brick by brick, and now he was standing on the wrong side. I didn't know you worked here, he said finally, trying to find an entry point into her world. Her eyes met his for the briefest moment. People work where they need to, Adrian. There was no venom in her tone, but it cut him all the same. He stopped himself, aware of the other customers nearby. This wasn't the place for the questions that clawed at him. Not yet. She wrote something on her pad and stepped back. I'll give you a minute to decide. And just like that, she walked away. Adrian watched her retreat toward the counter, feeling more unsettled than he had in years. The woman who had once known him better than anyone now treated him like a stranger. And yet, something told him their story was far from over. Long before the suits and the skyscrapers, Adrian Cole was just another struggling dreamer with holes in his shoes and ideas too big for the life he was living. He was 24, working part-time at a copy shop while hustling nights to build his first startup. The world barely noticed him. But she did. Naomi Bennett was impossible to miss. She had the kind of presence that made people turn their heads, not because she tried but because she simply was. Her laugh was rich and warm, her eyes fierce but kind. She worked at the coffee shop across the street from the copy center, paying her way through grad school. The first time Adrian saw her, she was standing behind the counter, hair pulled back, handing a customer their drink with a smile that seemed to cut through the dull gray of the city. It took him 2 weeks to gather the courage to say more than thank you when she handed him his latte. But once he did, conversation flowed like they'd known each other forever. She wasn't impressed by his grand plans to be rich. She was interested in why he wanted it, what he hoped it would mean. She had a way of asking questions that made him think about answers he didn't even know he had. They started small, shared lunches in the park, late-night walks when the city was quiet, whispered talks about the future. Adrian told her about the business he wanted to build. Naomi told him about her dream to work in community outreach, to help kids who felt invisible find their place in the world. Money was tight for both of them, but they didn't care. Their dates weren't dinners in expensive restaurants. They were cheap takeout eaten on his apartment floor, old movies on a second-hand TV, handwritten notes left under each other's doors. Naomi made Adrian feel like he was enough, even when the world told him he wasn't. When his first business pitch failed and he came home ready to give up, Naomi was the one who stayed up all night with him, sketching new ideas on scrap paper. When he couldn't afford the rent one month, she covered the gap without hesitation. She didn't just believe in him, she bet on him. And in return, Adrian loved her with everything he had. He memorized the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her passions, the way she hummed under her breath when she cooked, the way she fell asleep on his shoulder mid-conversation. Their love wasn't flashy, but it was solid. They made promises to each other, about a shared home, about children, about growing old side by side. Back then it felt unshakable. But even the strongest foundations can crack under enough pressure. And what Adrian didn't see, what he refused to see, was that the world he was chasing didn't have space for the quiet, grounding kind of love Naomi gave him. For a while they still believed they could have it all. But life was about to test that belief harder than either of them could have imagined. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a single fight that ended it. The truth was more painful than that. It was a slow unraveling, the kind you don't notice until the threads are already scattered at your feet. When Adrian's startup finally took off, everything changed. The long nights they used to spend together turned into long nights at the office. Naomi would wait up for him, dinner growing cold, until she eventually stopped trying. His phone started buzzing with names she didn't recognize, potential investors, business contacts, women from events who always seemed to have just one more thing to discuss over drinks. At first, Naomi told herself it was just a phase. That success demanded sacrifice. But the man who once talked to her about dreams and family now talked only about deals and deadlines. And when they were together, it felt like his mind was somewhere else, always chasing the next big thing. The pressure from Adrian's new world didn't help. His business partners made comments about Naomi, not directly but in that polite, condescending way that cuts deeper than open insult. She's nice, but does she really understand what it takes to be with someone in your position? His family wasn't much better. They didn't hide their belief that Adrian should be with someone more suitable, someone who would fit neatly into their image of high society. Naomi heard every word, even when Adrian told her to ignore it. She could feel the distance growing. The breaking point came on a night she'll never forget. Adrian had promised to make it home in time for her birthday dinner. She had cooked his favorite meal, lit candles, even put on the gold dress he once said made her look like she owned the sun. But the clock ticked past 8, then 9, and finally, close to midnight, the door opened. He was on his phone, laughing, barely looking at her. The moment he saw the table, the candles, and her face, hopeful, then crumbling, his smile faltered. But instead of apologizing, he said, "Naomi, you know how important this meeting was." And in that moment she realized the truth. She wasn't part of his world anymore. She was part of his past. The fight that followed was brutal. Words were said that neither could take back. She accused him of letting money replace love. He accused her of not understanding the demands of ambition. And when she told him she felt invisible, he didn't deny it. He just went silent. The next morning she packed her bags. Adrian didn't stop her. He didn't even ask where she was going. What he didn't know, what he wouldn't find out until years later, was that Naomi left with more than just her suitcase. She left carrying his child, determined to raise the baby without him, convinced that he had chosen his empire over them both. And as Adrian sat in that small restaurant years later, watching her glide between tables with a round belly and a steady gaze, the weight of what he'd thrown away began to crush him. Adrian couldn't take his eyes off her. Every movement Naomi made was deliberate, controlled, as if she had built invisible walls around herself and was determined not to let him step inside. When she returned to his table with a glass of water, he tried again. "Naomi, can we talk?" His voice was low, almost pleading. She set the glass down without meeting his gaze. "You're a customer. I'm working. If you want to talk, you can wait until my shift is over." He felt the sting in her words, but also a flicker of hope. She hadn't said no. The rest of his lunch was a blur. His investor eventually arrived, launching into small talk and business jargon, but Adrian's mind wasn't in the meeting. Every laugh, every handshake, every discussion of profit margins felt meaningless while Naomi moved in and out of the room like some untouchable vision from another life. He caught bits of conversation from nearby tables, customers thanking her for always remembering their usual orders, co-workers chatting about how she'd been covering extra shifts despite her condition. One older woman at the counter patted Naomi's hand and told her to take it easy, to which Naomi responded with a tired but determined smile. That smile lodged itself in Adrian's chest like a blade. He remembered that same smile years ago, the one she wore when they were broke but happy, when the world still felt like theirs to conquer together. And now here she was, pregnant, working long hours on her feet, without him. When the meeting finally ended, Adrian barely remembered shaking hands. As his investor left, Adrian stayed seated, watching Naomi clear a nearby table. "I'll wait," he told her when she glanced in his direction, her brow furrowed. She didn't answer, just walked away, disappearing into the kitchen. An hour later, the lunch rush died down. Naomi emerged, untied her apron, and slipped on a light jacket. She looked at him with that same unreadable expression. "If you still want to talk, we can step outside." The late afternoon air was crisp. They stood on the sidewalk, the hum of traffic filling the silence between them. "You look good," he began awkwardly, immediately regretting how empty the words sounded. Naomi's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's what you came to say after all these years? I didn't know where you were." He stopped, realizing how pathetic the excuses sounded. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her hand instinctively brushed over her stomach. "Tell you what, Adrian? That I left because I was tired of being invisible in your world? Or that I learned I was pregnant a week later, and decided my child didn't need a father who only showed up when it was convenient for him?" The words hit harder than any blow he'd ever taken in business. And yet, beneath her steady voice, he thought he heard something else: pain. He wanted to explain, to apologize, to beg. But Naomi's next words made it clear. "You made your choice years ago. Don't think you can just walk back in now because you feel like it." And with that, she turned to leave, forcing Adrian to decide if he was willing to fight for a second chance, or let her walk away again. Adrian stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching Naomi walk toward the bus stop. Every instinct told him to let her go. She'd made it clear she didn't want him in her life. But something stronger pushed him forward. "Naomi, wait." His voice carried over the hum of the street. She stopped, her shoulders tensing, but didn't turn around. He caught up, stepping in front of her, forcing her to look at him. "Just tell me. Is it mine?" Her eyes locked onto his, unflinching. "Why does it matter, Adrian? So you can write a check and call yourself a father? Or maybe swoop in now and play the hero?" The words stung, but he didn't back down. "Because I need to know if I walked away from both of you that day." For the first time, her composure cracked. She blinked rapidly, her lips trembling before she finally spoke. "Yes, she's yours." Adrian's chest tightened. The street noises seemed to fade, replaced by the pounding of his heart. "She." Naomi nodded. "A little girl. Due in 6 weeks." He ran a hand through his hair, trying to process the flood of emotions. Shock, guilt, a fierce surge of protectiveness. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her expression hardened again, though her voice was quieter now. "Because you'd already chosen. That night you didn't fight for me. You didn't fight for us. I figured you wouldn't fight for a child either. And I wasn't going to beg you to care." He swallowed hard, remembering the silence he'd given her when she said she felt invisible. How easy it had been to tell himself she'd be better off without him, without realizing what he was truly giving up. "What happened after you left?" he asked softly. Naomi let out a humorless laugh. "What happened? I worked 2 jobs at first, then 3 when the rent went up. I moved into a smaller apartment. I sold my car. I stood in grocery store lines with $10 in my pocket, praying the total wouldn't go over. I dealt with stares, with whispers, people wondering why I was alone. And I kept going because I had to." She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening. "I don't regret leaving. I regret trusting you to put me first when it mattered." Adrian felt the weight of her words settle into his bones. For years he had thought of Naomi as the one who walked away. Now he saw the truth. He had pushed her to the door and then watched her leave. "I can't undo the past," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "But I want to be there now. For her. For you. Whatever it takes." Naomi studied him for a long moment, as if weighing every syllable. Then she shook her head slightly. "You don't just get to want it now. You have to prove it." And with that, she stepped past him, boarding the bus without looking back, leaving Adrian on the curb with a choice to make: fade back into the comfort of his wealthy, lonely life, or step into the uncertain, difficult path of earning back her trust. After that heart-wrenching conversation, Adrian knew words wouldn't be enough anymore. He had to show Naomi, not just tell her, that he was serious about being part of her life and their child's future. The next days were filled with small but meaningful actions. He started by sending flowers, not the expensive kind, but simple bouquets with handwritten notes expressing his regret and hope. He visited the clinic where Naomi was receiving care, quietly waiting in the lobby just to catch a glimpse of her, never wanting to overwhelm her but wanting to be present. Adrian showed up at the restaurant, not as a customer, but asking the manager if he could help out, showing willingness to support Naomi's world on her terms. He helped fix things around the place, offered to cover medical bills, and most importantly, he listened. Naomi watched all this with guarded eyes. She wasn't naive, she knew promises were easy to make but hard to keep. But beneath her protective walls, a small part of her remembered the man who once believed in dreams beside her. One evening, after a long day, Naomi sat down with Adrian. "You're trying," she said slowly. "But trust isn't rebuilt in a day." Adrian nodded, his voice steady. "I'm ready to prove it every day. For you, for her." She looked at her belly, then back to him. "This child deserves a father who shows up, not just today but for the long haul." He reached out gently, not pushing, just offering his hand. "That's exactly what I want to be." The decision wasn't easy, and the road ahead was uncertain. But for the first time in years, there was a flicker of hope, an opening for forgiveness, healing, and a future they could build together. As Adrian took those first steps toward rebuilding his life with Naomi and their unborn child, one thing became clear: redemption isn't given, it's earned. It takes patience, humility, and a willingness to face the past without running away. Their story is a reminder that life doesn't always follow the path we expect. Sometimes, the hardest moments become the turning points that shape us into better versions of ourselves. What matters most is the courage to change, and the strength to forgive. Now, I want to hear from you. If you were in Adrian's shoes, would you fight for a second chance? Or would you walk away knowing the pain was too deep? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Dream Tales for more heartfelt stories that explore the power of love, loss, and hope. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep believing in the unexpected power of second chances.